Hey everybody, this is Josh. I was trying to repair my KitchenaidPasta pasta roller, which you can see here. It's part of a 3-part set. Now, one of the first things that it tells you, and it's imprinted right on there, do not immerse in water. So what did I do? I washed it in the dishwasher like a dumbhead, because that's what I do. So when that happened and it dried up, what ended up happening is you could tell that something in here had rusted, because when it was attached to the KitchenaidPasta and it turned, it made this horrible squealing noise. So I figured I either had to buy another one, which is what everybody says online, because these are not made to be repaired according to what everybody was saying, or I could try to fix it and take a chance. Before we get started, I'm going to let you know there are a bunch of things you need in order to take this apart, do some repairs on it, and put it back together again. Some of these things you may not have right off the bat, so we're going to walk through them. First thing, something to take pictures with, because as you go step by step, you should take pictures of every step you're doing, because later on you're going to go, I didn't know how that went together. And so reviewing your pictures is really important. Also, either with your cell phone or with a flashlight, you're going to want one of these things for when you're getting into the gizzards of this thing, because it can get kind of dark in there, especially if you're doing it some other time. By the way, props to my wife for letting me take over her daycare room. This is not a workshop, as you can tell. There's some other things. The instructions say that these rollers in here can be serviced by merely taking some mineral oil, which, as you know, can be used as a laxative, but I tend to use it on my cast iron when I'm oiling it down because it doesn't attract bugs. But the rollers here, they make contact on the metal, and you can take a toothpick, you can drip it, you can use one of those little squeegees for like the ear or nose stuff, and then you can kind of drip it in there to try to make sure that it spins easily. Now, spinning easily, that's another thing. One of the things I used was a pair of vice grips here, because then I can grab this and then I can turn it manually so that I can affect that kind of turn, because I'm not going to sit there in front of the KitchenaidPasta in the kitchen with all my stuff and try to do this. But that's one thing. It could be just there's a little bit of pasta or flour or something stuck in there, and if you use the mineral oil, you're good to go. All right, you'll want a hammer, and you're going to want, as thin as possible, a screwdriver. You're going to want a regular screwdriver. A pair of pliers never hurts to hold things in place. Inside the gizmo here are 4 nuts that are metric size 10. So you can get your socket set with a metric 10, or you can use a regular wrench metric 10. Either one will work. You are also going to want, when you get into it, there is a snap ring against the roller top. You're going to want to get a snap ring pair of pliers. I got this at Lowe's for $15. You're going to get to a point where if it is rusty inside, you're going to need to soak it, get rid of that rust. So what's one of the cheapest ways you can do that? Get a pan of some sort, bottle of white vinegar. You throw the parts in there, pour the vinegar over it, and then let it sit for like an hour, 2 hours. And that, since vinegar is an acid, it'll start eating out that rust. But once you take it out of the water, you're going to need a nylon brush to brush it off, because you don't want to scratch the metal, but you do want to get that rust off. I got this for $1 because, you know, it's a toothbrush. Cheapest way you can do it. There are a couple of pieces that are hollow, so to get inside of those and scrub them down, good old pipe cleaner. You can find those at a craft store or tobacco shop. May seem obvious in retrospect. Roll of paper towels, because you're going to get your hands dirty and wet. And finally, I think one of the main reasons they tell you not to immerse it is it appears, and again, I don't have any specifications because KitchenaidPasta doesn't make them apparent. It appears that this area in here, and probably a little bit in here, and maybe along the bolts as well, has been coated in grease, a food-safe grease. You'll find it listed as NSF H1 or H2 or H3, and you have to get some grease to pack in there so that later on it's going to prevent corrosion or rust, and it's going to keep everything moving smoothly. It's kind of hard to find sometimes, but I found it at an Ace Hardware store in the automotive section. What you want to look for is where it says that it is NSF rated, H1, H2, or H3. I don't know other places to get it around me. Probably some mechanics know better than I do. By the way, I'm saying right off the top, I figured this all out on my own, or I made it up as I went along. So if you have better ideas, please respond and say, Josh, you were way offline. Do this other thing. And then we can build some community around this, because I could not find one video or one reference on how to repair this. All right, so the first critical step on this is this all comes together, or comes apart in better vernacular, here on the adjustment knob that you use to adjust the thickness of your pasta. Problem is, KitchenaId does not make this part to come off. So this is where you run into your first big problem. And that's why you need your tiny screwdriver or some other device that somebody's coming up with as they're screaming at their computer saying that's not the right way to do it. And there's just a paper thin little space here where you can see that it goes in. And I'm sorry, but your pristine pasta roller is no more, because you're going to have to bang into it, and it is going to cause a little bit of a dent. You just line up in there, pop it until you're able to get it out. The cap comes out. Snap, snap. I want to take a picture of what this looks like. I'm probably not going to say that anymore. I'm just letting you know that in these that as you go along, you should be taking pictures, because when you try to reverse engineer it and put it all together at the end, you're going to want to remember what you did. Alrighty, so this adjustment knob has a spring and a washer and a screw right here. Very easy to get out. This screwdriver head is going to be kind of small. It's not one of your bigger ones. It's pretty easy, you just unscrew it. This knob now lifts out. You may notice that it's a round hole, it's got a flat side. That's so that you can get it back in there in the proper configuration later. Makes it really easy to do that. So now we've got the knob off, and again, that is like the most critical thing, because it's so much harder if you don't do it, as I found out. At this point, there's 2 screws on this side, 2 screws on this side. You just remove them in order to take these caps off. Now at this point, this is probably where you're going to run into your rust problem for the very first time. When I took mine apart to try and see what was going on, everything in here was rusted. Everything was rusted. The gears were rusted. The bolts ends were rusted. The nuts were rusted. So, I don't have it here. Oh, I do have it here. It's not safe for food, so don't think that this is like a great idea all around. But I have my can of WD-40 to spray it down, just so that I can unseize those bolts and get in there to do it. You might use a little bit of your grease, which is all supposed to do the same trick, but hey, I'm a big believer in WD-40, so that's what I did. So after it's a little bit dripped out there, which of course is going to cause a mess, so you want your paper towels all over the place, you're going to take your number 10 metric bolt to get in there and undo it. So much easier if you use a socket wrench. Oh, also, as I got in here, I saw little globs of grease kind of in the corners, which is what led me to believe that this area, because it has gears and everything else, probably was greased to start with. I'm definitely going to grease it when I put it back together. Now these bolts here, they go all the way through they go all the way through, and as you can see, there's some extra pins here. These pins I'll explain in a little bit, but when I first took it apart, they were kind of stuck. That's where my pliers came in handy. I just grabbed the end of it and pulled them straight out. So I got that loosened up. I'm going to take off the other side. You may notice that here, this assembly has 3 little screws. You could take this part off. I didn't find that it was necessary. So to keep life easier on me, all I did was I just left them in there when I took this part off. Now this is where the part that goes into your KitchenaId is situated, and it's just a quick insert here, very easy. You may notice, and you'll see reference to this online, a lot of people have reported that when they did something a bigger no-no than what I did, they put some wash rags or something in there trying to clean out that rattly pasta sound, and then ran it, that it sheared off. And that's designed, from what I read online, to make sure you don't damage your KitchenaId itself or any of these parts. So right in here you can see there's a slit. It's strong enough to stay together, and it will run your entire deal. But if you try to do the wrong thing and put a rag in there or something really hard to clean it out, this part's going to snap off. And if that happens, you got to replace this part. Apparently there are some aftermarket places that sell them, but fortunately that was not my problem. This part may be rusty in here also. Again, we took a picture of everything, right? So the ends of those bolts that I was showing you are right here. You can see there's no screw line or anything. It's just where the end is. I'm going to take the rest of the nuts off, and then we can go ahead and take it off. Again, the nuts were like the most rusty thing. When I was playing with this, I was able to take the nuts off pretty easily, but man, was that rusty. Alright, so then your bolts come out. Now, since I just bought the grease today so I could put everything back together and grease it up, you can see that even though I de-rusted my bolts, they've gotten rusty again. So I'm pretty sure that when you go to reassemble it, make sure you grease up your whole bolt. Otherwise, it's probably going to get rusty again. All the parts that you need to unrust should go in your pan. So that's one side of it. I got 2 more bolts on this side, so I'm going to take those out as well. Here's some guides. And this is, again, the part where you want to make sure you've been taking pictures, because these guides go in and they snap in a really weird way. I don't even know if I put it together correctly. I think I did. But they go in here, and part of it are these long rods that they use in order to stay in there. And what it appears that they do is they kind of scrape against the roller to make sure that the pasta, if it gets stuck, gets kind of scraped off. So they're in there, but they come out pretty easy. The first time, they really didn't. So I ended up having to finagle it. But there are rods in here where the bolts went through. Again, the first time, because it was manufactured at the company, I had a hard time getting those out. And that's where I got a paper clip and I was able to get in there and pull them out, so that these tubes that the bolts go through were able to come out. Obviously, because the bolts were rusty, these were rusty too. If you made my mistake and got it rusty, you're having to unrust like virtually every part. This is where it gets a little tricky, because if you look really close, there's a little snap ring, and it's like a cotter pin. It goes, there's the gear, then there's a divot in the roll where the pin goes, and then the top of the roll. And since this snaps in there, it keeps the gear from sliding off the end. So that's what keeps it in place. Now, this is the part where I expect to learn from you guys, because there's probably a better way of doing this. You have to take the ends of this pin and pull them apart so that you can get it off of the roller. I didn't know how to do that. I tried doing it with a couple of really sharp things because the holes are pretty small, and finally I decided, you know what, I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm gonna spend the 15 bucks and I'm gonna get some snap ring pliers and do it that way. So you can see they come in different types depending on who makes it. Sometimes it's a 90-degree angle, sometimes it's not. These do not have a 90-degree angle. They just have these teeny tiny tips. And unlike regular pliers, obviously, when you squeeze on it, instead of getting stronger, it pulls it apart. Instead of going together, it goes apart. So, we have to line it up. Got to get the little ends in the holes there. And then you squeeze it to remove the tension, and now the snap ring comes out. What that lets you do now is you can pull off the gear and remove the roller. Do the same thing on the other guy. So these tubes here, one of the things besides making sure they're not rusty is what are you going to do about the inside of it, right? This is where your pipe cleaner comes in. You can make sure to get it in there. Easiest way. And you just keep on pulling it around. And now you've got it. Then you just wipe it down, and you should have a second pipe cleaner, which I'm going to have to go off camera and go get. After I've dried all these off, I'm trying to make sure I've got the stuff out from there. And then I would suggest putting the grease inside the tube also. You can use a second pipe cleaner, get the grease in there. Your bolts are greased up, the inside of your pipe is greased up, and you can grease everything up. These don't really touch the pasta at all. I would think that they're probably not necessary to grease on the outside, but on the inside it's probably a good idea. So I'm going to finish these, and I'm going to grease it up with another pipe cleaner. We might come back in a second to show you that part, but you get the concept, so maybe not. What did you do over Labor Day weekend? Show people all the ways to not properly put this thing together. All right, now that we want to clean it, the way that it's recommended, or everybody talks about online, is to clean little bits, and this is also for your pasta. You know how your pasta gets in there and rattles around, and then you're trying to make a new sheet, and you got little dried bits of pasta from the last time you made pasta? Nobody wants that. So how do we pull it out of there? And also, how do we scrub these rollers from that incidental grease? You know, incidental grease is not something that you want to eat. Probably not be good for your tummy. So you want to get it cleaned off. So I've got it set to 1. Turn it on. Everything's rolling properly. They recommend you do this with a little bit drier bread, probably so that it doesn't stick to the rollers. But if you just get it in there, now it's scraping off all of that grease from the rollers. At this point, it is unrusted and it is put back together. So that is the only video on how to repair this pasta roller. If you can do better, please do. Thank you.